Our Tuesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Joe DiBiase from Locked On Sabres and Mike Distefano from Locked On Leafs. This is my second go-around on YouTube doing video, so I'm comfortable in my chair right now. Mike, are you sweating a little extra right now that everybody can see you?
Yeah, I don't like it. Not gonna lie. I just have a terrible setup. That's the problem. If I had an unreal setup, then I'd be totally good. Like, you look at what these guys on like ESPN and TSN got cooking on their setups. They look great. They went out, they bought a whole bunch of books for their bookshelf. I mean,
Yep.
I have some like stuff
You got
here.
some stuff back there. What's
Yeah.
back there? You got some baseballs?
Yeah,
think?
so I
It's
got
hard
some
to see.
baseballs, just like some memorabilia, some baseballs, some signed pucks, some
Let's put
just
you on the big
random-
screen.
Oh,
What's
there you go.
what's back there? We got some pucks, some memorabilia.
Yeah, there's
Is
a
that-
Daryl Sittler signed autograph.
Sittler.
There's Darcy Tucker signed. There's
Yep.
a Tom Hasek over there.
Yes, love it.
Six pucks, 3 baseballs. Yeah, just some random stuff.
All right, that's pretty good. I mean, bookshelves were there. I don't have much either. If you can, I'll move my camera up. I've just got some Buffalo decor over here. Buffalo hates you too. Everybody hates Buffalo. I guess that's a thing. I saw it. It was like $2. Thought it was a pretty good deal. But yeah, if you could tell by our other graphic that's really making up the big screen here, if you're also watching on YouTube, by the way, if you're not watching on YouTube, be sure to head over to our Locked On NHL YouTube channel and you can watch us on the podcast now. So a new way to engage and to take in the show. I hear it not just on Tuesdays, but on the Locked On NHL podcast throughout the week. We're doing it really throughout the network as well. So I'll be doing it on Locked On Sabres, Mike, and I know Locked On Leafs as well. So yeah, if you could see the graphic here, though, today we are going to do the snubs from our Locked On NHL Top 50 list as voted on by the Locked On NHL local experts. We voted on all the players in the league. And today we're going to be focusing on the guys that just missed the cut, the snubs. So I think this might be the most fun show we do, right? The snubs?
I think so. 'Cause the snubs are always the fun thing to talk about. The only problem about doing the snubs show first is that we can't talk about who they were snubbed for. So it is a little bit tricky having to do this where it's like, yeah, this guy didn't make it. He should have made it, but we can't say who he should have made it over yet. So it may be something that we're going to have to keep kind of bringing up and be like, yeah, I would have put this guy who wasn't even in the list ahead of this guy. But we might have to like have some callbacks to the snubs list a little bit throughout our top 50 release.
Mm-hmm.
Episode.
Yeah, I know on Friday we'll be talking a little bit about this with Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers, but yeah, you're right. Like not being able to there's some guys in the top 50. We've looked at the list that I don't think have any business being in the top 50.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so I'd love to tell you some of these guys should be over them, but I think we could still do.
Let's explain to those who aren't aware of what exactly we did. So essentially all 32, now we have 32 of our Locked On hosts compiled a top 75 list. So we had ranked our top 75 players. There were some write-ins as well. And then a consensus top 50 was created from there. And then that's pretty well how we came up with our top 50. So it's essentially, however they were ranked by all 32 of our hosts is how they were ranked from 1 through 50. And then these are the ones who missed out on the top 50 rankings and are considered our snubs. And that's what today's episode will be about.
Yes. So really we can jump right into it. If you have not seen the list, if you're listening to the podcast on the Odyssey app or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, some guys that just missed the list. We're really looking at, like on the graphic here that we have up on the video portion, we're the top 10 guys that just missed the cut, but we have other names too as well in here, as well as some write-in names that were pretty common among the Locked On NHL hosts. Getty Malkin misses the cut at 51. Kyle Connor, Morgan Riley, Taylor Hall, Sean Couturier, Zach Warrenski, Nicholas Backstrom, Alex DeBrincat, and Jeff Petrie, just to name a few. I mentioned Getty Malkin, I think. He's the number one name on the list here. Also, Steven Stamkos misses the list. He was a common write-in by many of our Locked On NHL hosts, but he does not make the cut. But let's start with Malkin. He is probably the biggest name on this list. I got into a little bit of a debate with Rachel on the Friday edition this past Friday about Malkin. and really whether or not he's underrated for his career. Rachel, I think, made some good points that he's not underrated, that he's going to go to the Hall of
Hold on.
Fame.
We're talking Rachel. We're talking Rachel Donner, the host of Locked On Flyers.
Flyers. Yes, I don't know. Where has the bias play in there? You think that would make her pro Malkin more so?
I think that would make her I think that would make her anti Malkin.
Well, okay, I see what you mean. So right, and she's making the case that that Malkin, it does get the proper amount of credit.
Yeah.
I don't think he has. I do acknowledge that he is treated at times like the superstar that he is, but he has lived in Sidney Crosby's shadow for his entire career. That's not for me to say he's a better player than Crosby. Of course, I am not going to sit here and make that argument, but I think he would be a much bigger name, a much bigger superstar if he had been on another team, dependent on whether his team's success would have been. But the list is more about who's good right now. Who are the top 50 players in the league right now? So anything before we get into what he is right now, anything on whether or not you think he's underrated for his career or whether maybe he's properly rated?
In his career, I think it's interesting because it depends who you talk to, right? Like, I think there are some who don't view of Getty Malkin as one of the top players in the NHL, where I do, and I always have. I know that he's been the number 2, and for those listening, doing my air quotes, the number 2 in Pittsburgh behind Crosby, but he's always been like a top 3 centerman in the NHL. The Penguins have just been uber lucky to have 2 outstanding players. And you take a look at the years that Crosby was injured, and it's Evgeny Malkin coming through, being arguably the best player in the NHL those seasons. Like, a couple of Hart trophies, few Stanley Cups. Like, the guy has 1,100 points in 940 games. Like, that's just 1,104. Let's not even take away those extra 4 points he had. Like, that's just unbelievable. There's not many guys who score at a point per game rate, and he has toppled that by leaps and bounds, and I think is, without a doubt, the most egregious snub here in this top 50 list.
Yes, I agree. I think he should have cracked it. I got upset, actually. Remember the NHL Centennial celebration a couple of years ago, and they put out that top 100 players of all time list?
Did he miss the cut there too?
He missed the cut there. That one was more controversial. I thought for sure he should have been in the top 100 players of all time. You mentioned, like, for the era he plays in, and to always be above a point a game player. And this kind of, I guess, is our transition maybe to whether he's a top 50 player in the league today, because he would be one of the older players, if not the oldest player that would have made the list had he done it at 35 years old. But since he turned 30, so in his 30s, he is 6th in the NHL in points per game, more than Nathan MacKinnon, Patrick Kane, Artemi Panarin, more than Steven Stamkos. He is still in elite company. And because that's a big sample size, maybe that's going too far back, you might ask, going back 5 years, a little bit of a drop off in the last 3 seasons when he's really started to run into some injury issues. But when he's been on the ice, he is still in elite company. He is tied with Jonathan Huberdeau and Steven Stamkos for 13th in the league in points per game. That outrates Alex Barkov, Jack Eichel, Mark Scheifele, Alex Ovechkin, Bergeron, Braden Point, Mark Stone. Like, he's still in elite company. So even if he's taking a step back as a player, I believe he's top 50. And maybe a little bit might be influenced by the Crosby shadow at this point in his career, because I'm not sure guys like Patrice Bergeron and others that are still in their mid 30s, because they're still number 1 centers and they're still looked at as the leader of the organization, that they don't get that. Maybe they're not slept on as quickly as it happened with Malkin here.
Well, here's what he's got in terms of hardware: 3 Stanley Cups, Calder Trophy, 2 Art Ross trophies, a Conn Smythe, a Hart, and a Ted Lindsay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's unbelievable. How many guys outrank that? Not many.
And that's like, yeah, and those Hart Trophy seasons I'm almost positive the seasons that Sidney Crosby was injured. I know that 11-12 was that season where he won the Hart, the Ted Lindsay, and the Art Ross, just absolutely cleaned up at the award show. And was the best player in the world that one season, like without a
Right.
doubt. Let me see how many points exactly he had
I've
that
got
year.
the Hart Trophy year.
A
He had
hun-
109.
109 points in 75 games.
Right.
Had 50 goals, his only 50-goal season, actually. So just goes to show, like, if there was no Crosby, right, and he didn't have to share the ice, and he didn't have to give up some of his ice time with Sidney Crosby, how much better could he have been? Like, it's not just the fact that I think he lives in his shadow in terms of, how much credit we get, but how much better could he have been? How much more productive could he have been if he was
Mhm.
the guy on that team or on any team uh, over the course of his career, as opposed to playing second fiddle and not being the number one go-to outlet?
He plays under 20 minutes a night for his career. I mean, I'm not saying he would be like a 24-minute guy. He's not a defenseman,
I would be
but
curious. I'd be curious to see where he ranks among players for like points per 60.
yes,
Like that's probably insanely high.
definitely.
I would bet.
Can I throw one other thing in on Malkin before we move on here?
Yep.
It's fair to call him a power forward, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. He's like
Yeah.
he's like a truck, isn't he? Like
He
6'3",
could
200. Like he's not thought of as a power forward, but maybe it's almost because he's too good with his hands.
He
And
plays heavy. I think that like he just
yeah,
plays a heavy game. Like I don't look at him and I think like, oh, this is like Peter Forsberg. Like he didn't play kind of
right.
that style of game, but he played a heavy game, and it was hard to knock him off the puck for sure.
That's why I almost want to say he's like one of the best power forwards of all time. But I don't know. Maybe it could be a little bit of a Russian factor too. That maybe you don't think of the European guys being power forwards as easily as you think of the North American guys. I don't know what's going on there, but I like to think he's a power forward. And I would, if he is one, if you're okay qualifying him as one, I would call him one of the best ever. He's got a little bit of a interesting future coming up too. Final year of his contract with the Penguins at 35. All right, so that's just one name on Malkin. I thought he was easily the most interesting name on this list. The guy who just missed the list, actually, even by a lesser margin than Evgeny Malkin, is Anzai Kopitar of the Los Angeles Kings. Kind of a similar situation, a center that might be a little bit past his prime. He actually today is his 34th birthday, so mid 30s, but even if he's not the same player he's been, still a highly productive player. Kopitar, much more of a two-way game than Malkin. What did you think of Kopitar missing the list, and do you think he still deserved top 50 at this point in his career?
Yeah, I felt that he was top 50. I think I had him ranked in my top 50, like just inside my top 50, though. But certainly, I think that Kopitar is a guy who's been a two-way force. It's funny when you look at these lists, and I know both of us are both high, big time NFL fans. When they do their top 100, it's always, do you look at it as going into this season, who's the top 50, or is it based on last season, or are we talking career wise, like, or is it just top 50? And I
Right.
feel like maybe some people rank some of this stuff differently. And a guy like Anzai Kopitar, it may be based off of last season or based off of going into this season where he found himself on the outside looking in here on the top 50. Because if you're going based on career resume, absolutely. I think of all of the current active NHLers, he has a top 50 career. Absolutely.
Definitely. I think now he'd be much closer to 50 than I even think Malkin would be. I had Malkin higher in my ranking than I had for Kopitar. But I think there's a reason he only missed by one spot. And we'll reveal who the guys that just made it above him on Friday's episode of the podcast.
And that guy did not make my top 50, by the way.
The guy who came in at 50?
Yes.
I don't think he made my top 50 either. By the way, with Malkin and Kopitar, I don't know how you did your list. I gave a little bump for centerman. Like maybe I took the value too much into it, but maybe I probably did, right? Like that's kind of where my mind went, is who are the most valuable players in the league, and I get the centers a lot quicker than I get the wingers for that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if everybody made their list that way, but that's just kind of how I was thinking of it. when I did it. Quick word for Bet Online before we get to the rest of some of the names on our miscutlet or on our snub list. As always, Bet Online is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. I am pumped. You a big college football guy, Mike? I forget.
I'm a big draft guy, so
Draft
I
guy.
follow college football based on the fact that I want to be educated for the draft. Yes,
Right. Okay. That's actually kind of what I do too, especially now that I'm doing all these crazy deep dynasty fantasy football leagues. You got to know who, especially the running backs are. So I'm pumped for college football. Bet Online, great way to be invested in college football. I know I'm gonna be getting some action down for week 0, which is coming up this Saturday. Also, of course, we're a hockey podcast. Check out some NHL bets. You could look at some Stanley Cup futures. Also, I did see this, Mike. They've got an Ovechkin to break Gretzky's goal record bet. Up at Bet Online.
I may have asked for it.
What do you think is favored here, by the way? Yes or no?
No. I bet you no is favored.
No is favored. No is actually even a decently heavy favorite at minus 300. Yes is plus 200 that Ovechkin will break Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal record.
1 second. Let me log into my Bet Online account.
You're going on. What are you going on there? Yes or no? I'm taking yes, especially with the odds there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to give me 2-1 odds?
The only thing about that is, that is an ultra futures bet. That you are holding, that bet is going to be in your account for probably 5 years. So you better make it worth it, because
I've had a futures bet that has been 2 years in the making, still hasn't come true. It's a futures CFL bet, and without CFL last year, I had to wait on it. So I'm all about them long-term futures bets.
Yes, I have one. It's not through Bet Online or anything, but I have one with my buddy actually that's been going on for 4 years now. That Ryan Tannehill will never start and win a Super Bowl. And let me tell you how nervous I got last year. 2 years ago? 2 years ago when they were in the AFC title game.
Yeah.
When he took over for Mariota. But anyways, Bet Online, hockey bets, football bets, check them all out. Bet Online, your online sports books experts. Use the promo code Locked On when you head over to betonline.ag. And by the way, be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using the promo code NFL100. All right, let's hop back into our Locked On NHL Top 50 snub list. If you're looking at the graphic on our YouTube channel, you've got Jeff Petrie is the next name on here. Petrie had a great season. He was even kind of like a sleeper Norris idea, I think, at the midpoint. Petrie might just be a victim of, he's not a sexy name, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, Jeff Petrie has kind of been around for a while. He was in Edmonton. He wasn't great in Edmonton, and then the last couple of seasons he's been in Montreal, and he was about a 40-point defenseman, and then this year really busted onto the scene, became the number one guy, really did some good things on the power play, 42 points in 55 games this season with the Montreal Canadiens. So Petrie had himself a heck of a season, but I think it's honestly probably properly rated at 33 years old. I don't believe I had him in my top 50. I think he's a guy who's properly on the outside looking in my opinion.
I was surprised he came that close because he's got a lot of things working against him. Age, he's got really like I mentioned, like he's not the sexiest name.
It's 1 year of production. Like he's been fine the last little bit. Like he's been an above average productive defenseman, but he hasn't been like an elite guy. And we're talking about a top 50 players in the league. Like that's elite of the elite. And Jeff Petrie, although he was that this year, I took into account kind of career-wise, right? That's the way that I took the approach. Like who's top 50 career-wise? And to me, Jeff Petrie just didn't quite make the cut.
He was a slow starter in Edmonton too, at least offensively. Like there are some good underlying numbers. I remember at the beginning of his career, he had good possession numbers, good offensive zone rates, but like the points were never there.
Yeah, still has the really good possession numbers, and Montreal was just a really good possession team this year. And he put up a whole bunch of points this season, but I don't know. I think this is you've got to see regression coming here. Like if 33 years old, it's kind of an anomaly type of
Mm-hmm.
jump that he took this year. I would be surprised if he replicates it. So I think
Yep.
this would make sense.
Alex DeBrincat, 30-goal season coming off, 56 points in 52 games. First time in his career that he topped a point-a-game player. He's been close even before that. I mean, 2020 was his down year, 45 points in 70 games. Before that, 76 points in 82 games, 52 points in 82 games in his rookie season. I thought you could have made a case for DeBrincat. I mentioned earlier, I kind of put a premium on centerman. So it was elite company for those wingers. DeBrincat has been very good, but I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, but if he's not scoring goals, he's not helping you a lot, I guess is the point I want to make about him. Not a ton. Like he's not a top 50 player without the shot, I guess is what I mean. He's got one elite trait, and I would say he's pretty good at everything else. Is that fair to say?
But sure. I'm more bullish on DeBrincat.
Okay.
I had him in my top 50. I think I'm even having him in my top 40. Like he was
Okay.
hovering around that 40 mark for myself. I really like DeBrincat. Some of it could be the fact that I have him in a dynasty league, so he's done some really good things for me.
It's 100% the reason.
That could potentially be it. I mean, like, listen, the guy's been in the league for 4 seasons, right? And 28 goals his rookie year, 41 his second year. Had a bit of a down year last season, like the season that got cut short due to COVID. Just 18 goals through 70 games, but then this year came out on fire, 32 goals through 52 games, and on an 82 game pace, that's a 50-goal season. 50-goal season. You're going to tell me that Alex DeBrincat, who is on pace to score 50 this year, doesn't deserve to be in the top 50? 4 years in the NHL, and he's basically scored 40 twice.
Right. His shooting percentage is one of the elites, by the way. Like Matthews outranks him, Draisaitl outranks him, Scheifele, Marchand. So for a guy that's a goal scorer, usually those high volume shooters have a little bit of a lower shooting percentage rate. The fact that he's up in that elite territory definitely speaks to how incredible of a goal scorer he is. Nicholas Backstrom, maybe a little bit past his prime. The Capitals just in general. Something about like they're getting older. I think they're going to be one of these teams that takes a step back coming up. Backstrom's seen a little bit of a dip in his offensive totals in the past couple of years. He's also kind of going through that process that happened with Joe Thornton late in his career, where the goals just completely went away. Like we all knew they were playmakers. Thornton and Backstrom were both elite playmakers, but for those guys, it seems like when they get to the later stages of their careers, the goals almost completely vanish. I mean, Backstrom's got 27 goals in his last 120 games. So he's not quite at the point where Thornton was yet, where he was scoring like 7 goals and putting 60 assists on the board. But Backstrom was not in my top 50. Was he in yours?
I don't believe so. I think he just missed out for me. I don't know why it's not that I haven't liked Backstrom, but I've been lower on him than a lot of other people. Like I know there are some who certainly probably had him in their top 50. I mean, he just missed out on ours, so there had to be some.
Right.
And I get it. Like he's been around the league for a while. He's been, Ovechkin's right hand man, and he's got 100-point season in the NHL. He's got almost 1,000. He's almost a point per game, like 980 points in just over 1,000 games. So almost point per game, but. For me, I don't know. I've kind of always been a little bit lower on Nick Backstrom, and he just missed out on my top 50.
Zach Warrenski, who's the guy's face that you've been looking at the whole time, probably about as big as ours is on the YouTube channel here. Resigns in Columbus. I think a legit top pair defenseman in the league. I don't even remember. I think he might have squeezed into my top 50, but I don't have a problem either way. Couturier is next on the list. Sean Couturier. Rachel Donner, I know, will be happy to know that Couturier was in my top 50. I think he's been one of the great two-way centermen in the league for the past couple of years. I think the production and the even the defensive metrics look very similar to Patrice Bergeron in the past 4 or 5 years. And I do wonder if his reputation would be better if he had the benefit of a thing like what Bergeron has going for him is, you are that player, but you do it on a championship contender year after year after year. And maybe Couturier has kind of fallen to the Flyers haven't been that good the past couple of seasons.
What has his offensive output been, though? I don't think it's been quite exactly as like. I'm not ready to sit there and proclaim him as Bergeron quite yet. What has he got
I
here?
think his
Couple
offensive
75
totals
points.
have really jumped up the past 4 or 5 years. Almost like it's very rare. Like him and Marchand are like the only two guys that I've seen where like year 6 in the league and it just goes up.
Yeah,
Like it's yeah. So I don't know what played into that, but 2018 is really where it started. He had 76 points in 82 games, then 76 points in 80 games, 59 points in 69 in 2020, and then this past year, 41 in 45. So, just under a point a game player. And for how good he is as a two-way forward, I don't know. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's crazy to put him in that Bergeron territory, at least like 30-year-old Bergeron territory.
Yeah, I'm going to put him a peg below, but still, I had him in my top 50. So the fact that he was omitted from the top 50, I think, is a little bit ludicrous because he is one of the premier two-way centermen in the league. And like I said, we're privy to knowing some of the guys who are inside the top 50. And I think on Friday you'll take care of some of these guys when you do the 41 to 50 list. But I think that Couturier, in my estimation, probably should be in there over 4 or 5 of those who I had in the top 50.
He is a little bit lower, by the way, those really since he made that jump that I mentioned in 18. So that's the last, 4 seasons. Points per game, Bergeron 1.01 and Couturier 0.91. So a little bit below. He has that's the same number as Kopitar, though. Just below Zibanejad. Kaprizov's only 1 season. Braden Point 0.95. So he's in pretty damn good territory, but I guess you're right. He is still lower than Bergeron, even in the offensive output. Taylor Hall. I thought Taylor Hall it was funny that Taylor Hall almost made this list. I don't know what to do with him at this point. And part of it is, I guess I watched them in Buffalo.
Yeah,
like
is it Taylor Hall Buffalo or Taylor Hall Boston? Like, which one were we ranking here?
Any Taylor Hall that's not Buffalo Taylor Hall, I think he should be. I think he should have been in the debate if he wasn't in it. I wouldn't have a problem if he's in it.
Yeah, I think I had him on the outside looking in. I think I did. I appreciate what he did when he went to Boston. I think that it's a pretty good setup for him. The fact that he doesn't have to be the go-to guy, something he actually wanted. He said that publicly after he left Buffalo. But I just the inconsistencies over the last couple of seasons, to me, I think is something where I couldn't put him in my top 50. Like if you're a top 50 player, elite of the elite, you got to be able to do it night in, night out. And Taylor Hall just hasn't been able to do that over the last couple of years.
What did you make of your boy Morgan Rielly not making it? Did you have Morgan Rielly in?
You know what? I don't remember actually. Now that I think about, I really should have wrote them all down to be honest with you. But if I did, it was really late into the top 50. I'll be honest. Like literally 48, 49, maybe even on the other outside looking in. I don't have a problem with him being ranked outside. I really don't. I think Morgan Rielly, he had that 1 year, a couple of years back where he scored 20, had 72 points, but he hasn't quite been like that premier number 1 guy. He's a top pair guy, but he's not really a number 1. And for me to make this top 50 list, I think you really, as a defenseman, need to be like a workhorse number 1 power play specialist, or at least somebody who can play in all aspects of the game. And, he can do that, but he doesn't do that as effectively as I think a top 50 guy should. So I'm okay with him being on the outside looking in.
Anybody else you want to mention quick here among skaters? We'll get to goalies coming up in a second here. So any other skaters you think are worth talking about that didn't make it?
Yeah, I think someone who's not named on this list here, but somebody who I thought had an unbelievable season, who maybe he didn't make my list, but I'm glad that he, was a little bit higher on some people. So I think over the next couple of years will make the top 50 list, because I'm sure we're going to do this again. It was a really fun exercise. But Nikolai Ehlers. for the Winnipeg Jets. Absolutely love his game. And actually, he may have made my list late. Now that I think about it, I'm taking a look at some of the players, and I definitely would have him over them. So I think he did just sneak into my list. So I think Nikolai Ehlers is somebody who I believe plays a tremendous two-way game. His possession numbers are strong. If it wasn't for an injury in this, later in the year, I think that he really would have burst onto the scene and would have had an even better playoff. But he got into the playoff basically injured and didn't quite make a name for himself. I'm a little bit surprised that Darnell Nurse didn't make it based on the season that he had in Edmonton, to be honest with you. Outside of that, I don't know if there's anyone else on this list here in our top 75, I guess, that didn't make it. Stamkos is kind of an interesting name. He wasn't part of the 75, but he was a common write-in. I may have written him in as well. Because of energy, had another really interesting name, but he had a down season, so I'm not surprised he didn't make the top 50.
Yeah. Poor Red Wings fans. Dylan Larkin, really the only guy I think they had a prayer with. And he comes in at, what did he end up with?
71st.
71st, which I believe is the lowest. That's the lowest ranked player among any team for their top guy. Even Ottawa, Thomas Chabot, just a little bit above that at 65.
Is there a...
Or am I missing... Did Brady Tkachuk get above there? No, Brady Tkachuk didn't. No, he wouldn't be there at that point. So I think that Larkin in Detroit would be the lowest of any team.
Interesting. That's right. That's very possible.
Who on the Coyotes is
I don't know. Did Anaheim? I don't think Anaheim had any.
Yeah, maybe I'm just thinking that because there are teams that just don't even have a guy.
Yeah, I don't think Anaheim has anyone in the top 50 either.
Anaheim. Well, they'll have Jack Eichel soon enough. So
on the outside looking in, though, they did have John Gibson, who came in at 75 for us.
Right.
Which to me, that seems a little low for John Gibson.
Yeah, let's get into the goalies real quick though. Before we do that, just want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? I mean, you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pockets. Same thing. So save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts just to use the middleman at the chain store or car dealership? Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, let's get to some of the goalie snubs. We had a few goalies that just missed the cut. I don't believe we have any listed on our graphic here, but I have on our list here UC Saros of the Nashville Predators comes in at 64. We had John Gibson, as you mentioned, at number 75. And there were a couple other goalies that I know didn't even make it into the top 75. But how about on those two? You can start with Gibson because I know you just mentioned him before we went to the read there. What did you make of Gibson, who's had a couple of down years statistically? Before that, though, I mean, one of the best goalies in the world.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he was a top 5 goalie year in, year out. But, playing on a very bad Anaheim Duck squad, like, he's been left out to dry so much. And the last couple of seasons, I'm sure, have been taxing on him, let alone the side that, COVID's been afoot the last couple of years as well, which probably also doesn't help. But I really do like John Gibson. Like, I think he's a fantastic goaltender. I'm not surprised that he was left off the top 50 list based on the last couple of years. Recency bias, I'm sure, played a big part in the way that a lot of us voted. I know that it somewhat did for some guys. For me, so I'm not that surprised. But 75, having him that low, I thought was a little bit surprising.
Mm-hmm. I think he's interesting to me. I think the more likely reason why his numbers have tanked is what's in front of him. the quality of scoring chances, the amount of high danger scoring chances that Anaheim gives up is near the top of the league in each of the last 2 seasons. So he's facing, he has the toughest job maybe in hockey right now among goaltenders, but playing behind that Ducks team. So I think he has a legitimate excuse for why his play has dipped a little bit. But I wonder, like, if the team turns it around, is he going to return to being the superstar goalie that he was? I think the answer to that question is probably yes, but I guess because I'm not 100% on it, he was not in my top 50. But to be upfront here, and if you listen to our Atlantic Division super draft that we did, if you listen to our Metropolitan draft that we did, me and Mike did each of the last 2 weeks, I'm not a guy that really values the goalie position as much as most people. So I think I only had 3 goalies in my top 50. Is that a crazy low number? How many do you think, off the top of head, do you think you had?
I probably had at least 3, because I can think of, I had that guy,
Yeah, without giving it away.
Yeah,
I know, it's tough, but
I had 4. I think I had 4.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
That's so maybe I'm not that far off, but
I'm
yeah,
curious. You only had, I guarantee you, I know the guy who you snubbed.
Yeah,
Guaranteed I know who it is.
we will absolutely, I'm sure, get to that next Tuesday. And then UC Saros, real quickly. He missed the cut also, coming in at 64. Man, I love the player. He's undersized, so that always hits me right here in home. My brother was a smaller goalie growing up, who kind of like all those small goalies are always I'm gonna fall for. I remember Jonas Enroth, the smallest goal you've ever seen in your life. He used to play for the Sabres, like 5'5". Was like one of my favorite players growing up. But the numbers are there on Saros as well. 945 save percentage at 5-on-5. That was number 1 in the NHL. It was number 1 in the NHL among goalies that had played at least 10 games. So not counting guys that played like 1 game. Just getting over Alex Nedeljkovic and your boy Peter Marazzic, who's now in Toronto, by the way. So what did you think of Saros missing the cut? I think maybe a big reason that went against him is, yeah, there's been production throughout his career, but the guy's never played more than 40 games in a season.
Yeah, and like he's just not a known commodity. I mean, realistically, Pekka Rinne has been the guy in Nashville for so long, and unless you're a hardcore hockey nut, you're not too familiar with what Saros is doing, unless you were paying attention in fantasy this year. Then I'm sure you figured it out real quick what Saros was able to do. But I mean, realistically, up until this season, though, he hasn't been that amazing of a goaltender. The last 2 years combined, 71 games. A plus 260 goals against, at about a 914 save percentage, which isn't bad, but
it's like middle of the road.
It's middle of the pack, realistically, in today's NHL. But then you look at what he did this season in 36 games, a 228 goals against, and 927 save percentage, with 3 shutouts through that stretch, a 21-11-1 record. No, those numbers scream top 50, but I think it's just the fact that it was kind of a 1 year.
Right.
Like,
no, I know.
It was
sorry to cut you off. It's his first real test at being like a number 1.
Yeah, it was. And I think he passed it for sure. But I think in order to crack this top 50, I'm going to need to see it again. If he can do it again this season, then I'm sure I'll have him in my top 50 next year. If this was just top 50 players from the 2021 season, Saros probably makes it in, right? But again, because the way that I voted, I looked at it as like career, like who are the top 50 players, who's had top 50 careers to this point in their careers. So for me, the one breakout season wasn't quite enough for me to believe and stick him up into my top 50.
Man, I'll say this, and it's perfect time to wrap also, if you can hear the dogs barking in the background here for me. Saros at BetOnline is plus 4,000 to win the Vezina Trophy. He finished 6th this past season. 4,000 is the same odds as Kevin Lankinen, Vitek Vanacek. I mean, that's incredible value.
Now, BetOnline's looking to go bankrupt. They want to give you all of their money.
I wonder how much of that do you think is this Russian kid, Askarov, that I think is supposed to be coming over this year?
I mean, maybe
He's not gonna, but Askarov's not gonna start right away. I
no,
don't think.
no. Like the job is Soros's to have, but again, it could very well be a platoon, kind of like it was this year. I
Sure.
mean, there are only 36 starts out of 56 games.
Yeah, and I guess the other factor there, I still love the bet. I might make it. But the other factor as to why maybe the odds are that low is to win the Vezina, you really got to have team success. And what are the odds Nashville's going to be that good a team this year? I mean, they're not nothing. They're better than my Sabres for sure.
Are they?
No, they're better than that. I mean,
We'll see if Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene find the back of the net again. What they combined for, like 11 goals this year?
it was brutal. Like,
Last
yeah,
nine,
they
maybe?
it was more $1 million on their cap than it was goals.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's never a place you want to be. All right. So any other goalies? You think those are probably the two snubs we needed to talk about?
Yeah, probably. I think like if we're looking into the future, I think Thatcher Demko will maybe make his way onto this list in the future.
Yep.
Markstrom, you think Markstrom deserves to be in this conversation here at all, or
I would have said he deserved to be
on the list?
on the snub list.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have put him in my top 50, but I think he deserved to be on this. He would have been like that next tier of goalies for me within that. The Rangers think Igor Shesterkin deserves to be in this conversation, given what they paid him.
Well, speaking of getting paid and not being in the top 50, talked about Darnell Nurse, but so Seth Jones. So both of those guys got
Right.
paid this summer, and neither made our top 50 list.
That's right.
Same with Adam Pelech, who got paid this summer as well.
Yes, that's right. All right. So, by the way, I'm looking at these Vezina odds. Peter Marazzic plus 1,600. Top 10 in the odds.
Really? That seems very high.
Is he their like their definitive number one? I feel like you
No.
got to be to have those types of odds.
He's not, which is why it's actually very high. Like as of now, I think Campbell's. I mean, they're just going to be a platoon, right? Like this is a platoon goalie system in Toronto. So I'm surprised they got that high.
That's crazy. Campbell is a little bit lower at plus 2,500. So
what's Hellebuck?
Hellebuck is second at plus 1,000.
That's pretty good odds.
Vasilevsky is the favorite at plus 450.
Yeah. Which may give a little sneak peek into some players you may see later in the audience.
Yeah, maybe. We're not going to confirm nor deny that.
No.
So yeah, 50 through 41 will be Friday's edition of the Locked On NHL podcast with myself, Joe DiBiase, and Rachel Donner, who will join me on Friday morning to go through that. So we will have another YouTube episode up on Friday. So if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Odyssey or Apple Podcasts, check us out over on our YouTube channel, Locked On NHL. You can follow us on Twitter, the podcast account at Locked On NHL Pods. I am at Sneaky Joe Sports. Mike is at Nicky_Canuck. And that's going to do it for us in this edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.